In September of 1992 in Sveti Stefan, Yugoslavia, Bobby Fischer played a rematch against Boris Spassky, 20 years after they'd competed for the World Championship. The event was beset by controversy.
This was the height of the Yugoslav Civil War, and there were United Nations sanctions which prohibited commercial relations with Yugoslavia. The United States Treasury Department wrote to Bobby Fischer to warn him about this.
Should Bobby choose to play the match and accept his winnings, the penalty would be a $250,000 fine and 10 years in prison.
So this is my reply to their order not to defend my title here. That's my answer.
Bobby ignored the warning and defeated Spassky again. He took the money, more than $3 million, and ran.
A warrant was issued against him, which is still in force. And at that point, his wanderings outside the United States began.
Bobby went to Hungary with Zita after the championship. He was in love with her. He wanted very much to make it. She took off with another guy. Painful. This was possibly his only true love.
Over the next 12 years, Bobby bounced around Europe and Asia. Stuck overseas, he missed the 1997 funeral of his mother, Regina.
In the early 1990s, according to one chess grandmaster who knows them both, they were talking almost every day.
Ultimately, he was very close to his mother, and it must have been a great tragedy for him that he couldn't spend those last years with her, that he was a fugitive.
He first now comes back into the public imagination with these wild anti-American, anti-Semitic rants that he gives on Philippine radio.
Well, this is all wonderful news. It's time for the U.S. to get their heads kicked in. It's time to finish off the U.S. once and for all. I say, death to President Bush, I say. Death to the United States. The United States, the Jews. The Jews are a criminal people. They mutilate their children. They're murderous, criminal, thieving, lying bastards. They made up the Holocaust. There's not a word of truth to it.
He was increasingly obsessed with these anti-Semitic issues. He wasn't playing chess anymore. So this was taking up more and more space.
He said things like all the Jews in America should be rounded up. I mean, it's horrendous.
Close down all the synagogues, arrest all the Jews, execute hundreds of thousands of Jewish ringleaders.
Despite having a Jewish mother, Bobby has never considered himself Jewish.
His anti-Semitism was a mindset. It was a sort of psychopathic illness which he couldn't shake off.
Probably some hidden or not so hidden antagonism toward his mom, perhaps toward his absent father.
In 2002, a stunning secret about Bobby's paternity was discovered.
There wasn't a whole lot known about Gerhard Fischer, and when we started digging into it, we discovered that, in fact, Gerhard Fischer had never actually really been part of Bobby's life, that he never actually ever entered the United States.
All evidence points to the father being Paul Nemenyi, who was a Hungarian physicist who died in the early 1950s.
It wasn't clear whether they ever actually told Bobby that Paul was his real father.
Beyond the physical resemblance, Bobby and Paul Nemenyi seem to share certain personality traits.
Nemenyi was a very interesting character. According to one former co-worker who we interviewed, he had a habit of carrying soap around in his pockets at all times so that he could wash his hands after he touched door handles.
He was an animal rights activist. He did not believe in wearing wool. He would occasionally walk around with his pajamas sticking out from underneath his clothing.
Bobby appears to have inherited more than just his father's eccentricities.
Nemenyi had this, as I read, he had this phenomenal spatial ability. He apparently thought and looked at issues in ways that no one else did. It was unique.
In chess, you have to visualize how a board with 64 black and white squares that's filled with maybe 24 pieces, how it might look 10 moves down the line. That's all about spatial relations.
It really seems like there are a lot of parallels in the way that they thought.
There remains one final twist to the revelation of Bobby's biological father. Paul Nemenyi was Jewish, and so Bobby Fischer, arguably the world's most vocal anti-Semite, is the product of not one, but two Jewish parents.
Paul Nemenyi's life and career were ruined by the Nazis. He was fired from his university teaching job in Germany because he was Jewish. And to have a son then who has somehow grasped onto anti-Semitism as a cause is incredibly ironic.
The absolute criminals, the Jews. The Jews are behind this. It's a filthy Jew country.
The explanation then of Bobby's resentment remains open for debate.
I think my father, at the end of the day, he viewed Bobby as a guy who had unfortunately lost his mind.
A lot of people think he's mentally ill. I don't think he's mentally ill. He's just become mean. He's become rotten inside.
Coming up, an American hero languishes in a Japanese jail.
He didn't know what was going to happen to him.
So he's with me as a gangster. He takes orders from President Bush.
In July of 2004, after traveling freely for 12 years, Bobby Fischer was arrested in Tokyo for having an invalid passport. Unbeknownst to Bobby, the U.S. had revoked his passport 1 year earlier.
This was many years after his crime of playing the 1992 match. Why had it taken them so long? One can only assume it was because he'd started making these anti-American comments.
The United States is controlled by the Jews. It's a filthy, dirty, rotten country in every way, and it's always been a filthy, dirty, rotten country.
Bobby Fischer, I think, was being pursued because of what he said, which, should be anathema to our American ideals of free speech.
Month after month, Bobby sat in a Japanese detention center. Lawyers fought to get him free. Salvation would come from an unlikely source.
The Icelandic chess authorities, who were very fond of Bobby, and they had never forgotten the debt they owed to him for putting Reykjavik on the map.
Bobby Fischer is a part of the Icelandic history now. He became the world chess champion here.
This little group was formed, kind of activist, Free Bobby Fischer group. Bobby became aware of our efforts. So he wrote a letter to the foreign minister asking to become an Icelandic citizen. And it was passed with a great majority.
After 9 months in captivity, Bobby was released to the Icelandic officials. He traveled 5,500 miles to his new home.
When you saw him arriving at the airport in Iceland, he looked like he had gone to hell and come back. He had been at the edge of the abyss. He was grim, forlorn. He looked broken.
Just days after arriving, Bobby held a press conference.
Sorry for keeping you waiting.
It was nothing but a kidnapping. The Jews told Bush to do this. Then Bush told Koizumi to do it. Then the U.S. government and the Japanese government sat down and decided Fischer must go to prison. He must be punished. He must be destroyed.
How do you see things playing out here? Are you going to spend your time here? Are you going to travel?
What is your name?
Jeremy.
Jeremy what?
Shapp.
Your father was Dick Shapp?
He said, almost instantly, your father, he was a Jew, right?
His father, many, many years ago, befriended me. Acted kind of like a father figure. And then later, like a typical Jewish snake, he rapped me very hard. He said, I don't have a sane bone in my body. I didn't forget that.
Honestly, I don't know that you've done much here today, really, to disprove anything he said.
When I think about him, I feel very sad indeed. But look what he did to himself.
Every game that wasn't played is a tremendous loss in a sense, because it was wonderful to watch him play.
The worst thing in the world, the waste of human potential. For him, for all society.